You might notice there's only two of us on stage. Unfortunately, our co-presenter, Andres, had to pull out. He's from EFICODE, though, and we have two of his colleagues here to join us for the Q&A at the end. In the meantime, Kevin and I will do our best to cover Andres' slides. So if we stumble or if we sound like we're just reading off a script, just bear with us, please. So I'm Doro. I'm one of the product managers at Jira Service Management, or JSM, as we'll call it. I focus on assets specifically, and I sit on the cloud side of the business, but I do collaborate really closely with my colleagues over in data center as well.
And my name is Kevin Patterson. I've been with Atlassian for about a year. I work on the solution engineering team. I've got 10 years of IT service management consultancy, both in pre-sales and post-sales, and then 10 years of operations before that, working in both banking and telecom.
Cool. So just our quick standard disclaimer. Everything we're about to present here is for informational purposes only. And whilst we do our best to accurately forecast our delivery and timings, there's no firm commitments and everything is subject to change. So before we dive in, just a quick overview of the role of assets as a key component within ITSM in Jira Service Management as we see it. So at Atlassian, we created JSM to help organizations such as yourselves to unlock high-velocity teams. And over again, we've seen JSM help our customers deliver great service experiences fast and without the cost and complexity of some of the more legacy ITSM solutions. Because thanks to our heritage in development, we understand the need to really invest in helping accelerate the flow between development and IT operations teams. And one key component that allows this to be successful is providing a shared configuration management system that both dev and ops can utilize. Because it's here that services, infrastructure, applications, and all the interdependencies amongst them are understood across all teams. So with JSM Assets, or formerly Insights, and our approach to configuration management, we help empower teams build and deliver exceptional service experiences. And we believe that in today's complex technical landscapes, it's no longer an option, but it's really a necessity to unify teams around services to help improve visibility and collaboration.
So let's summarize today's presentation. We've decided to break it down into 3 key components for you. The first thing I'm going to talk about today is what is asset and configuration management. We're going to follow that up with how do you get started. So it's a journey, and I'm going to work with you to understand the steps you can take to get started with JSM Assets. And then finally, we're going to wrap up with a where are we going? And Doro's going to take you through a roadmap of some of the features that are coming your way very soon. So assets, I call it a database of anything. So assets, formerly known as Insight from our Mindville acquisition, is available for premium and enterprise subscription. It's basically a database of anything you want it to be, and allows you to map anything in Jira Service Management. So it can handle hardware assets. Some use it to map employees and customers, or even licenses or patches. In addition to managing any kind of assets, you can create relationships and interdependencies between all these different objects within assets. One thing I tell all my customers that I work with is that it's not just for IT assets. Many of the projects I've actually shadowed tend to be really focused on IT service management. They're bringing in things like laptops, desktops. They're bringing in their infrastructure, servers, routers, switches, all that. But I always encourage folks to look at other things as well. So I put some examples on the screen here for you behind me. One thing I'm seeing a lot of success with is bringing people records in. That could be your employees. It can be vendors, suppliers. Skills and training is interesting, too. On my team, on solution engineering, we actually grade ourselves on our skills for all of our products on a scale of 0 to 3. So that allows us to assign the right solution engineer based on our skill sets. So Asset is tracking that information. So when one of my sales reps needs somebody to join them on a sales call, they can go, take a look and see who has the right requirements. That's all tracked in Assets. So it's very simple and easy for us to set up and manage on our team. Another common area I see folks using Assets for is facilities, tracking things like buildings, offices, warehouses, anything you can think of that's physical that you can actually track in a database. This helps with asset management because it's good to know where your assets are in a normalized way. So you can actually go right to the room level, even the desk level for where these things are located on. So I really encourage you to consider having facilities and locations be within your asset repository. Another one, practices and processes. So, in our modern ways of working, you find that there is a lot of documentation out there. So, think of your HR department. You've got so many policies and procedures. Wouldn't it be great for a centralized place for them to go to be able to find these things, and most importantly, leverage automation. So when an issue comes in for a certain type of request or inquiry, I can put that information in the request for the HR analyst to be able to see without going to try to find it. So it's a great way to accelerate them getting back to your employees. And then finally, it can be anything. So those are some good common examples. I've got one I'll show you today that actually looks at a manufacturing example for using Insight. So a lot of cool things to walk you through in our session. So let's kind of dive in first, though, to the asset and configuration management portion. So one of the things this technology is going to give you is visibility of what you're managing. So it's called assets, so it just makes sense to track things like what's in stock, what needs to be refreshed. You can actually use it for improving and planning different projects. You can track these things within assets to really help you with that project. I've also seen a lot of hours saved when it comes to your asset management process as well. So it really helps the asset manager when it comes to finding out details about these different assets. It's also good for tracking things like license cost savings by knowing the available licenses that you have. So a lot of organizations struggle with being able to track not just what they have, but where is it installed, and being able to reconcile the difference so they know when to buy more licenses or when to not renew other licenses because they're not being used. So that's a very common use case we see in our assets system. So what I want to do next is kind of walk you through a demo. I know a lot of you have probably not seen our asset technology, so I'm going to walk you through 3 use cases. We're going to focus on the first use case. It's going to be focused on my employee experience. So I'm going to show you what this looks like from a typical request standpoint. Then I'm going to show you a ITSM use case for change management, and then my manufacturing 1/3. So you should be seeing it on your screen, and you are. Fantastic. So what you're seeing here is Atlassian assets. So front and center right now, I'm looking at my object schema for people. So these are all the employees in my system. So it actually contains attributes about these individuals. I'm going to scroll down here, and I'm going to find myself because I should be here. And there I am right there, Kevin Patterson. So let's go ahead and drill in and take a look and see what an asset record looks like in Atlassian Assets. So here we see some basic details about me, Kevin. So I've got my name there. I've got the organization, my department, team, status. A lot of things can be tracked here. What is important to note is you can federate multiple sources into Asset to build these records. So it's not just coming from Active Directory. I can pull in Active Directory. I can pull in HRMS. At Atlassian, we use Workday. So we actually use a technology called EFICODE to be able to bring that data into our platform and populate my asset records. So just be thinking federation when you think about building these different types of records. Scrolling down a bit further, you can see a bit more information. Some things can be manually entered, like my t-shirt size. So my marketing team knew what size shirt to get me because in our system, my shirt is set to small. I should be a medium, but small seems to fit OK, so we'll go with that. So that's what a record looks like in Asset. So I want to show you, though, what you can do with this information, because some tools are great at kind of containing them in a database, but it's good there, but it'd be great if you could leverage it with your issues in Jira Service Management. So let's walk through what your employees can see in our Help Center. So a Help Center is where I go to request service from IT or from a service provider. I can report incidents or request new things. And I want to show you an example of how you can leverage assets on your fields here, so or your forms. So I've got a new service request I built called Report a Broken Asset. So this is going to look a little different if you're not familiar with assets, because you're going to see asset objects on the form here. So scrolling down, you can see which of your assets is this impacting. In the past, when I logged tickets for equipment, I'd have to dig around on my laptop and find the asset tag that IT put on there for me. And I always found them tacky, so I'd peel mine off, which is kind of problematic when you have to put the asset tag in. Well, that's no longer a problem for me, because with assets, I can actually hit the drop-down, and Asset knows what I have. See, Atlassian's given me not just this MacBook Pro, but they've given me 2 monitors. So whatever I have a problem with, I can come here. It's Kevin Patterson. It knows who I am, and it shows me my assets through filtering down to only showing Kevin's assets here. So I can pick and choose the asset I'm having an issue with. And I'll pick my laptop. And we'll just go ahead and say, having an issue with my screen resolution. You might say, why is that? Well, because earlier today, getting this set up took a few minutes because we had some issues there. So for some reason, I can't seem to change it correctly. So just like that, I've got my details in, and we can go ahead and hit send. So that really simplifies the logging process. Think about this from your end user's perspective. The friction's gone. I'm not hunting for asset tags. I just come here and pick the thing I'm having a problem with and go ahead and tell you what's wrong, and that goes right into the system. But it's not just good for them, it's great for your agents as well, because if we look at this from an agent's perspective, the agents are going to get a wealth of information front and center on their screen. So here I can actually see the incident record here, and we see the reported assets showing up front and center on my screen. I can see the asset tag here. If I drill in, I can even see attributes about the asset. Now, I could show any attributes I wanted. I keep mine very short and simple. I'm showing what the basic details are. Hey, it's an Apple. In fact, it's a MacBook Pro. So I see that right here on my screen. If I wanted more details, I could drill in here, which I'll do to give you guys a visual of that. So here I can see how it kind of relates to things in our environment, and to the right-hand side, I can see a larger list of information about this laptop. You know, what's interesting, if we look at this, it actually tells me some important information. It tells me that, hey, the warranty expiry date happened a little while ago, back in October, so this thing is no longer under warranty. Now, wouldn't it be great if your agents knew that without drilling in? Well, through the power of automation, I can give you that. If we scroll down a little bit further on my screen, we're going to see that Atlassian's automation checked and said, hey, I think this thing's out of date. You might want to check that warranty date. So what I'm doing here is trying to feed your agents as much information as I can to make their jobs a little bit easier, making their job much easier. So that's an example of an end user request or an incident going in and being supported by our asset system. So I want to show you two more. The next use case I want to show you is more of a change management or change enablement use case. So let's take a look at an application within my CMDB. The one I'm going to pick on today is Oracle. So I'm tracking Oracle as a CI in the asset CMDB. Here I can see some attributes about Oracle on my screen there. Most importantly, I can go through and see other things about this. And I like this because I define my standard changes for all my applications here. As a former change manager myself, one of my pet peeves was miscategorized changes. I'm not sure if any of you have that issue, but I always found that my agents were submitting standard changes when, in fact, they should have been normal changes. And Atlassian Asset can actually help you with that if you're experiencing that. So here we're seeing that all our standard changes have been documented for Oracle. So these are the different change types we have for standard changes. If I drill in, I've defined a few things here where I define what this is, so I can see the implementation plan, the backout plan, and other details about my standard change. So if we go to log the standard change, I'm going to do that through the Help Center as well. Here I can go through as Kevin Patterson. We'll pick the application. We'll drill down and we'll find Oracle. So going down a bit further here, I've selected Oracle. When I go down and hit my drop-down list, I'm only going to see those standard changes here. So if it's not there, I can't do a standard change. So this ensures that they're following the right process. So we'll go ahead and pick that column reindex here, and we'll go ahead and keep the dates as stated, and we'll hit send. So I've just logged a standard change within my system very quickly and easily by selecting things from the asset system. Now, when I'm working on this change request, here's what I really love about this. Because it's a CMDB, I've got the ability to visualize other things in this environment. Here I can actually select and I can view what these interdependencies are to other objects or other CIs. I can even manipulate and modify this. I might want to go 2 levels out, so I can come here and select, and I can actually expand my view out to understand better visually what's going on here. I could even change the filtering. Maybe there's certain things I don't care about. Maybe I don't care about things like file systems and the standard changes that are documented. I can pull those out to make the view a bit easier on my eyes there. So it really does make it easy for me to understand the impact of the change visually. Now, something else I like to see is right on my screen here, if I scroll down a little bit, look at all this information pre-filled out for me. It took my implementation plan, my backout plan, and all those details and put them right into the record. So this is a great way to really accelerate the information getting to your agents because it's all documented Insight or Asset, so you can actually bring it right into the record so they can work on that front and center on the screen here. So this technology really is going to help you standardize and do a better job with change enablement here. Now, I've got one more use case. This is a completely outside of IT use case. Many, many years ago, I used to work for a manufacturing company called Teleflex. And years ago, they're a medical company now for instruments. Back then, they had lots of things. I was in their marine division. We made boat stuff. So we did a lot of return merchandise requests. Things would break all the time, so we had a huge intake of parts and things. So we built our very own RMA application, which was a pain to manage. Well, I've gone ahead and done that in JSM. So if we scroll over here, I've created a form on my customer support site for intaking my return merchandise authorization requests. Here I can go through and make this request on my screen. So this fictional company is High Velocity Instruments. So yeah, I actually bought a guitar from these folks. And I'm going to go through here and select the vendor where I bought this guitar. I bought this from American Music Supply, so we'll go ahead and select that. I'll pick the product ID of my guitar that I bought. Let me look and see what that is. Oh, it's this one right here. It's this AC8361. The serial number is, let's see, And what's going on here? It looks like my fret is broken. So we'll scroll down a bit further. I provide my information of where they should ship this thing. Let's go ahead and send it to my house. Let's do 123 Deer Lake Road. Because this is being recorded, I'm not putting the real address in there. Don't want any junk mail. There we go. And we'll go ahead and submit this in. Oh, don't want to save that address. No, I do not. So I've just logged a RMA within our system here. Now, if I go back to this to see it from the agent's perspective, they're going to get a view similar to this. We'll go ahead and refresh my screen. So the agents are going to be able to see this as it comes in with its own set of workflow. I can see everything that I just populated. We can drill in here. And just like before, I can see information from assets. I can see American Music Supply. If I want to drill in, I can say, oh, well, this is coming from our ERP system. I can see, oh, phone number and email address. If I want to talk to them, I can actually do that. For product, I can look at the ID itself and say, well, what are the components that make up a guitar? And I had to Google this stuff because I can't play a guitar, but I know now the parts of guitar. So this is my bill of material. So if a customer has an issue with frets, those are actually tracked as inside objects and tied to this product ID. So I can actually go through here and see the frets and send those back out to the customer, ensuring they get the right part. So this is an example of asset being able to handle a unique use case outside of a traditional IT use case. So it's not just for IT. I want you to be thinking about using this for other business challenges you might have. It's a great set of technology to do that. Highly encourage you to give it a shot. So that concludes the demo portion here. So let's go ahead and change it back to the slide if we could. All right, so we've talked about what asset is. Let's talk a little bit about how you can get started using this technology. Where do you go from here? They say the journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step. So there are many ways to get started. We have found that there are usually 3 key steps to success that most customers follow to be successful. The first is defining the value and expectations. You really want to understand the use cases deeply, understand the roles, the expectations, and the value that your users are looking for. The second revolves around identifying and modeling the data. So understanding that the data sources that you pull data from and the structure they have, and understanding the purpose of that data. So that's the second step. Finally, you're going to want to implement and iterate. So you don't have to do everything at once. You want to start small and grow with intent. So define automations, integrations, and data synchronization. So what I want to do is elaborate with some steps and some tips to kind of help you along this journey here. So the first is the identify the stakeholders. When defining the value, include as many teams as possible and identify those stakeholders. So you want to reach far and wide here to make sure you get the right people that understand their processes. So that's step 1, is identifying those folks. Number 2, you want to collect high-level descriptions of the desired end states of these stakeholders individually. What's their dream state? So understand where they want to go. Sometimes one topic can be kind of an interest of multiple parties. So you'll want to talk to stakeholders both together and independently to make sure they're all aligned. Some might have different goals than others. Third, you will need to reach consensus for each use case and decide whether or not to include it in the scope. A lot of times when you start reaching out to stakeholders, the scope is going to be quite large. So you want to make sure you can deliver this quickly. So be sure and filter down and do what's necessary. And again, grow with iterations one step at a time. And then lastly, owners versus users of the data. This is important to be able to differentiate, right? So you want to make sure you can define the access rights, the stages, and all those different components, who the owner of the data is to go know where to find that data, who the user of the data is, who can see the data, who shouldn't see the data, probably pretty important there too, and who's going to be editing that data. So there's a couple of examples that I'm going to walk through and questions to clarify on this next slide here. So every day we see new applications or systems joining the IT landscape. In working with our customers, we find that today the average enterprise has over 180 applications in use in production. And that number continues to grow month over month. So our technical landscapes are growing. Sadly, even though the data exists in the landscape, finding the correct system and then finding the correct person can be difficult, as people tend to work in silos. They work in their own domains, and most of the systems are very disconnected. In summary, it's not simple, but with the help of assets, it's definitely possible. Let's look at a very common example here on the next slide. So as a change manager, I like to know which business applications will be affected during a resource upgrade and a planned operation to ensure the risk and customers are not impacted. So a very, very common use case we see every day. So where is the related infrastructure information? You may get an answer that is hosted in the cloud or managed by a site reliability team. So this is one of the first questions that I ask. What are the business application definitions? That's the next question. So there may be defined in the enterprise architecture management tool, which is managed by enterprise architects, solution architects, or technical architects. So that's the next question. We have two different systems managed by two different teams. How are they related? That's also a very common question. So you want to be able to get a well-defined resource tagging strategy in place. And I'll talk about that a little bit later here. So, and going through this process, you really want to be selective. I like to use AWS as my example because either folks are using AWS in the cloud or Azure. It's very, very common. So this is a good use case to start with here. So if we look at an AWS environment and your stakeholders saying, I want it all the things, and it's very common. That means 200 plus products. That number is growing every day with AWS. That is going to take you months, maybe even a year to implement. That is a lot, right? So with this kind of integration, do you really need all that data? And it really ties back to your use case, right? So only bring in what you need. Now, the middle way, on the other hand, there is AWS config, which could be an alternative, which is designed to keep track of changes for configuration items. It covers about 45 foundational products. It doesn't cover everything, but perhaps enough for your use cases. So this is great because it's weeks, not months, to be able to grab these. So again, we're thinking about those use cases when we define our scope here. Or maybe you just need AWS Systems Management Inventory, which could be the right choice for your use cases. It's only including 4 main products. You get your servers, applications, network, and your access control lists. That can be done in days. So which one's the best method? It really is determined by the use case that you have and what you're trying to accomplish at the end of the day. I've never seen the answer be all the things. It's usually going to be somewhere between the config and the AWS SSM. That's usually where most use cases lie today. So again, it all comes back to the use case. You don't need every single data set from the source. So you can be selective and pick only the bits of data you need from AWS or really any system that you're working with here. Now, another common data source is the enterprise architecture solution. They are built to store logical definitions and their dependencies, which are critical for your organization. These systems have their own data model. And assets allow you to replicate the data model as it is. You can have the same definitions, relationships, and keep the same properties. Having the freedom of data modeling in JSM is fantastic. This can also be a good way to remove the language barriers in the workplace. As a team using LeanIX may call one entity application, another team may call it business application, and another team might call it something completely different. They most likely work in silos in a disconnected way, so this helps bring that together. When these teams meet, they need a translator to understand each other, and assets can improve that collaboration between teams by the replication of any data model here. So let's assume the data we need exists in AWS config. We use a proper tagging for all resources. We have LeanIX data structure ready. Now it's time to connect the dots to unleash the power of assets. You have the data sets aggregated from different systems and a data model designed accordingly to the organization's needs so they are ready for automatic data propagation. You just analyze one use case and may have many, many more. You can repeat these same steps to find the best data model for your organization. So now assets need data as all databases do. It definitely, the more you want to consider the data you're putting in, but it's a database at the end of the day, so it's going to want that. So there are multiple ways to propagate this data into assets. So I want to discuss with you the best ways to implement this. So that use case was pretty sophisticated. So let's kind of take it back a little bit and make it a little simpler because when you're importing data, it's not always that complicated. It could be simpler use cases. So one of the things I find day in and day out is every organization, whether they admit it or not, keeps their data in an Excel file or Confluence space, and it's updated manually. We can't seem to get away from these CSV files and Excel files, right? So a very common way of import is CSV, JSON, and Excel. It's a great way to get the tools in. Asset discovery, this can be your knight in shining armor. So Atlassian provides a discovery tool called Assets Discovery, which is free of charge, and captures all the configurations in your data center in an automatic way. This is a very easy way to populate assets into Asset. So it's a great way to get started if you don't have any discovery going on today with existing tools. And then finally, with the help of the import API, it is possible to develop custom integrations to replicate data from the other sources by keeping the source data model. So Jira Service Management automatically also supports webhooks, and they may be handy in some use cases. So Assets is not limited to one data model, but it can support multiple data models at the same time. You don't have to choose one over the other. Now, while building your structure, there are a number of choices and decisions you're going to need to make. And I want to talk to you about those different decisions. So when you're talking about asset integration, I want to summarize this into 6 areas. So the first is, let's start with stakeholders, right? So who is going to benefit from this integration? You may need different data sets represented in different ways. Detail dependent on the person or the persona that benefits from that integration. So that's one of the first place I start is the stakeholders. Next, we'll go over to data. Plan for data normalization and transformation. That's the next step I look for is the data. Now, third is going to be security. That is one of probably the big ones here. Security, data access, visibility. You need to make sure that sensitive data or personal data is handled properly in your design. There are several integration methods, which I mentioned in the previous slide, the manual discovery, the REST API. So that's also something you're going to want to identify as the method of which you bring these objects into our system. And then frequency. Are these daily updates? Those cover most use cases, but real-time data flow may be crucial in some operational use cases. So identify the frequency in which you need this. And finally, sequence, right? So if you're updating objects, there's a good chance that some objects might reference other objects. So ensure that you're importing those foundational objects first, and then the later objects, the ones that are using it, second. So you want to make sure you're doing it in the proper order. So sequence can be important when you're bringing in your objects into Asset. Now, one of my favorite things about the technology is the way we leverage our automation in JSM. So automation is crucial and critical to unlock the power of assets. So it is possible to execute automations when a record is created, updated, or deleted within assets. You can have a scheduled automation which would scan an object schema and check for some conditions such as a warranty laptop being expired 30 days from now, and have a digest record created that shows all the laptops expiring in 30 days. So had we done that, we would have seen my laptop was already expired, right? So that's a great use case to be able to do, and that can all be done through automation. You can include a branch through automation, which allows you to run actions on sets of objects separately from the root of the automation flow, so giving you a lot of flexibility in your automation rules. You can create assets, edit the assets, search for them. You can edit an issue, assign that asset to an issue, or even update the asset all within a Jira issue through automation. So all this is done within the user interface. You don't need development skills to build these automation. So very, very important. It's very graphical focused, so you don't need to be a developer to make most of these things happen. So I want to talk to you about a real-world example we actually use ourselves, and it's about stock management. I've actually copied and pasted the automation rule on your screen here. So you may have an organization policy to keep 5 laptops on the shelf at all times. So when somebody breaks something, you don't have to wait for procurement to order that device. It just shows up in the moment of need. And we can do that because there's 5 sitting on a shelf at all times. So this kind of automation flow, with just a couple of steps, you can work with. Whenever a laptop is assigned out, the automation rule runs. It checks the number of assets in the inventory. If it's less than a certain threshold you set, now I set my threshold at 5, you can have it create a task, whether it be in JSM, Jira Work Manager, over to procurement to go order more laptops. So you're always ensuring your threshold is at that level that you set. So very common use case. I see that all the time. The difference I see, though, is the journey of an asset may be different in every organization. So commonly, this requires involvement of multiple teams to work in collaboration and align their process for successful service delivery. And with assets in JSM, you can adapt to your team's individual way of working. We all work differently, and JSM can easily adapt to that way of working. So I've done my part. Dora, I want to go ahead and pass it over to you.
Thank you, Kevin.
Yes.
All right. So thanks to Kevin, we all now have a good idea of what asset and configuration management is, or assets for short, how to get started, what are the steps to take for successful implementation. So as we said, I'd now like to take us through our roadmap, both in the short and long term. Midterm is in there as well, to keep the theme of music in this presentation too. Just like in a band, there's so much hard work that's happening in the background. So here's a shout out to all our teams working really hard behind the scenes on making this happen. Okay. So before we dive into the roadmap, I'd just like to give a quick overview of the different offerings we have for our customers. A lot of you here, they might be aware, but there might be some that are not. So just to bring everybody on the same page. So for Jira Service Management, we have cloud on the one side and data center on the other. And in cloud, Atlassian does all the heavy lifting for you. So cloud comes with built-in platform and security, comes with compliance, faster setup, and no maintenance. You also have financially backed uptime SLAs, and you have access to continuous innovation to make sure your teams at all times have access to the latest and greatest. On the other hand, we have our data center offering, and this is our self-managed version where it just gives you full control over your infrastructure. You want your data management, security, and compliance set up, how and when you want to manage both upgrades and deployments, but also you can cater uptime and performance right to your needs. Now, at Atlassian, we are a cloud-first company, and we believe cloud is the future. And long-term, we'd love as many customers as possible to migrate over to cloud. That said, we do recognize that right now, when comparing the capabilities between cloud and data center, we're looking at some gaps that we see in cloud still. But we're working really hard on closing these gaps and removing any blockers that may hinder you from adopting cloud. We also recognize that for some of our customers, cloud is not an option, and there might be business requirements that prevent you from ever operating in cloud. So we'll continue to evolve data center because that is a great option for those customers. So let's start with our roadmap and some of the exciting features that we're just about to launch, or in this case, already are in the process of launching. So a lot of you might know that over the past few years, Jira Service Management has completed a number of acquisitions to enable teams to deliver an amazing service experience. That includes Proforma, it includes Opsgenie, but last but not least, it also includes Insight. So as part of a wider initiative to consolidate all these separate products into a single harmonized product experience within JSM, we are in the process of this harmonization piece, as we call it. So as a first step, we have recently renamed the previous Insight product into the Asset and Configuration Management capability within JSM. And that is all about breaking down any mental barriers and making it really easy and intuitive for your teams to understand all the capabilities Jira Service Management can offer. As a second step here, we're in the process of fundamentally rebuilding our interface. So we're bringing the entire UI onto the Atlassian design system. And that will include not only an improved user experience, it'll also improve our accessibility, but last but not least, it'll increase our velocity as we move forward. By being able to leverage existing models and components, we'll be able to design and develop features much faster as we move forward. And it also allows us to integrate easier with some of the other capabilities within JSM, such as forms, which is my next point here. So coming soon, in January 2023, we are about to launch the integration of assets with forms. For those that don't know, forms is a really easy to use no-code, low-code interface, our capability within JSM that allows any team to build these interfaces to interact with their customers and employees. And with the upcoming integration, you'll not only be able to include the asset object on the form, but you'll be able to build conditional logic that will display or hide certain sections within the form depending on which value has been selected. And you can apply AQL to filter whichever results or options are available within that form field. So for example, Kevin mentioned he had his laptop earlier that was already pre-selected because the system knew he was an employee with those exact assets. But what if, as part of his onboarding form, we would ask him, what is your preferred asset? And what kind of laptop do you prefer? Is it a MacBook? Is it a Windows? And we can do that with the integration with assets and forms. And once that information is captured, we can leverage Jira Service Management to spin up automated workflows that trigger procurement, that trigger approvals, but also that start the lifecycle management of that asset. So then in 5 years' time, when it comes to renewing that asset, we already know and we trigger reminders to both staff and the employee. And thirdly, on cloud, we have recently launched our open beta for enterprise customers to access assets as part of an Atlassian Analytics. This will allow you to not just monitor your inventory and review the changes over time, but you can build and run custom reports, both on objects and attributes. And you can also analyze changes and trends over time in more detail. For example, how do your assets relate to Jira incidents or requests and changes? So that really allows you to identify who are the troublemakers in your inventory, what are the objects or object types that frequently have incidents raised against them. Or you could set up dashboards that list out your assets and the ones that are up for contract renewal by due dates. And you can also split that by individual departments. And most importantly, you can do that across schemas, so you're not fixed to single schemas within your site. And so let's have a look at the sort of mid to long-term roadmap and what are we working on. This is not strictly speaking in chronological order as we're looking to launch it, but this is really to give you an idea of what are the big themes and moving blocks that we have our teams focus on. So I won't dwell on this first part too much because I've already covered it, which is our consolidation piece, which is all about we have the inside product and we really want to make it the asset and configuration management capability as a seamless experience within JSM. And secondly, here we have what we would call our enterprise pillar. So we want to allow teams of any size to use assets at scale. And we know that for enterprise customers in particular, they just have advanced needs when it comes to scale and performance, compliance, and in a little bit more detail, so for the scale side for cloud, we are looking to support up to 3 million objects by mid next year. And we will look to build this over time to just allow any team to leverage assets. But we don't just want to say you can store 3 million objects. We understand that you also want to use those 3 million objects at any part of the product. So we are also heavily investing in performance to allow you to just access these objects at any point. We also recognize for enterprise compliance is a really, really big need. So in the coming year, we're looking to build out the geographics that we support for data residency, and we're looking to introduce BYOkey. More longer term, we'll then also look to include compliance standards such as HIPAA, GDPR, but the compliance pillar is a huge one that we're working on. And then the last two here, one is migration. I know that is really relevant for a lot of our customers that are currently on server or data center and are looking to move over to cloud, where the journey for assets specifically is not the most seamless one right now, but we do really want to support that better as we move forward. So Longer term, our vision is to be fully integrated with the Jira Cloud Migration Assistant that we know a lot of our customers already use to migrate JSM and a lot of the other Atlassian products. But in the meantime, we also want to offer little stepping stones. So as we're working on that larger piece, how can we right now allow customers to make that migration easier? So we are looking at enabling schema-level imports and exports. And we're also looking at how can we retain object keys and links to Jira references and automation rules as we do so. And then last but not least, here we have our import integrations. And as Kevin said, a lot of our enterprise customers, we're looking at 180 plus applications that they operate within, which are all potential sources of assets. And whilst we have some of these sources of how to get the data in, we understand to be a fully mature CMDB offering, we need to create these seamless integrations that allow you in an automated way to bring in information consistently. So as a first step here, we're looking to make our import APIs available via Forge to really open ourselves up to the ecosystem. And then from there, we will be building a number of those integrations ourselves. We mentioned Azure. We're also looking at SCCM, Jamf. So we're looking at what are the top hitters and the ones that we know the majority of our customers need. But we'll also continue to partner really closely with our marketplace app developers and our vendor partners, such as Device42 or AWS, to just be able to offer as many integrations as possible to our customers in the future. And then our last pillar here, which is what we would call our expansion pillar. And we see this going two ways. One is going deeper within IT, so expanding vertically. And on the other hand, we also look to go horizontal within ESM. And some of you may have attended the separate breakout session we have around ESM, unless it's happening right now, I'm not quite sure. If not, I would encourage you to catch up on the recording, because there's some great content on how we strategically think about the role of Jira Service Management for enterprise service management. But to go into a little bit more detail here, so when we say we want to go deeper within ITSM, so we're really looking at how can we deeper integrate with some of those IT service management practices, such as change management, for example. We're looking at building out advanced audit logs at any point of the product. And we're looking at granular permission schemes. Kevin mentioned a lot of the data that can be housed in assets, but we understand some of this data is quite sensitive, particularly when it comes to people information. So we want to build more granular ways of how we can hide or show or prevent certain people or allow others to access this information. And when it comes to going horizontally within enterprise service management, it's really driven by our strong belief that assets can house us the power to help any team more efficiently practice their services. So we are looking to meet teams where they are. We understand that not all teams, day in, day out, operate within Jira Service Management, but we're looking at how can we surface the asset information in the places where those teams operate. So the Confluence macro is one of the first ones that comes to mind there. We're also looking at other integration with components such as Smart Links. And we're looking at some of the other Atlassian products such as Advanced Roadmap or Jira Product Discovery, and how can we bring the value of assets to those tools as well. On this pillar, we're also looking at more easy and intuitive ways to help teams to get started and use assets. So we're looking to introduce out-of-the-box components as well as templates. And on this pillar, we are still in the explore phase, so I'm quite excited to be here. I've had some amazing conversations already, so we're really keen to hear how you think assets could help any team in your organization. And now, before we start our Q&A section, we just want to share some key takeaways and next steps on your journey with assets. So first up, a quick summary of the key themes for successful implementation. So number one, flexibility is key. Kevin took us through that you can start small and your needs will evolve over time, but stay flexible as you do so. And start with a specific problem. Don't go too broad too quickly. Which goes hand in hand with don't include more data than you need on day one. It's very easy to clog up your system with a lot of information that you may not need, which then reduces your flexibility over time. So you can build over time and start with that specific problem and the data you need for day one. And then last but not least, keep the goal of accurate enough in mind. You don't need to be perfect from day one, and 100% accurate CMDB is a great idea, but in practice, not always achievable. Having a CMDB, though, that is accurate enough is better than having no CMDB at all. So we really encourage you to get started. And here's some takeaways on from more information on assets and some additional resources we can point you to. So first up, we have what is called the Atlassian University, and we offer some really great courses on there that'll help you become an asset management expert. And for those of you that haven't heard, we've significantly lowered the cost of these courses in the second half of this year, and those discounts are here to stay. Secondly, we have our early access programs. So we're always looking for eager customers to help us test new features. And if you spot a feature on our public roadmap or one that you really need, we encourage you to speak to your sales representatives or solutions engineers, but also keep an eye out on our community portal, where we often have call to actions to sign up for these early access programs. And lastly, we have a new white paper coming out in January that includes a huge information on asset management in Jira Service Management. So it covers the basics like we went through here today, but it also goes into some of the more advanced capabilities. This will be distributed via the resource section of our website, so keep an eye peeled on that. Right, and now we have 12 minutes left, so we'd like to invite our partners from EFICODE onto the stage, who are a Platinum Solution Partner, which will take us into our Q&A. But we'll let them have a quick word about EFICODE first.
Thank you, Dora and Kevin. Thank you for being here in London. And guess my favorite song, London Calling, eh? So this is Magnus and Gary.
Hello, everyone.
We just got married. Clear Vision and EFICODE, that's why we have the double hearts here. Yeah, so yeah, we're open for questions.
Yeah, go for it.
Right, we have 2 microphone runners. We would just encourage you to make yourself big and bright, and they'll come find you.
Hello. Okay, hey guys. So my name is Dave Wimbush. I'm the Service Delivery Manager at BMG. So we're really keen to use Insight or assets for our CMDB, but the main thing that's stopping us at the moment is the lack of backup and restore. So which we really need this in place before we can use it in production. So I think at the moment we've been working with a marketplace vendor, and we can do a backup, but the restore, it doesn't preserve the links between the objects and the issues. So it's not really fit for purpose. So my question is this on the roadmap? And if so, do we know approximately when this would land?
Yeah, yes it is. I can't share timings just yet, as we're still exploring what exactly the solution there would be, particularly for the restore side. What we're hoping, though, is part of what we're building for the migration piece, which is the schema-level import and export, that can hopefully fill some of that need, because once you'll be able to export at the schema level, you could use that as a workaround version, as an archive and backup, and you'll be able to easier restore that information.
Okay, cool. We'll check that out. And one more question. I know that recently there was the new feature to be able to import from URL. So that's really cool, because we're doing things like getting data dumps from GCP, from Okta, so on and so forth, popping it in a bucket, and then we want to be able to use that to import. But at the moment, I don't think there's like a token-based approach to getting that data. Is there any, or is there anything on the roadmap to include elevated security on that?
Yeah, great question. Yes. We're looking to introduce API token-based authentication for that field, and I would say the second quarter of next year. So we're working on it now. The Christmas break is in the mix, which slows things down a little bit.
Yep.
But API token will be the first step. We're also exploring OAuth long term. We're still looking how many of our customers will be satisfied with just the API token. But we are definitely working on that. And call out on that as well. You can then leverage automation to have those imports scheduled, which we know is a great feature.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you.
Great.
Hi there, my name is David Meredith from Associated British Ports. I've just got a quick question about the user information that can get imported into assets. So we utilize Atlassian Access at the moment, but we don't have a way to use that data in Jira Service Management for things like line manager approval and to do our reporting based on region or department and that kind of analysis. So I'm just wondering if there's any planned integration with Atlassian Access or further integration with Active Directory and LDAP.
Yeah, Active Directory we're looking at as part of our Azure integration. What we also understand, user data, particularly as we go into the ESM space, is really relevant. We know for HR teams and marketing teams, it's all centered around users. We do think we need to work a little bit through the granular permission scheme as well, because that is quite sensitive data. So we don't just want to launch straight into allowing all people data to be in there. It is on the roadmap. I can't quite share timings for it yet.
Hello, Paul Claxton from the Vedi Group. This one's been on your roadmap and pushed back about 10 times so far. So when are we going to finally get the Intune integration?
Right. Again, I don't think I want to share or can share timings on this, exactly because you just said we sometimes put things on the roadmap and it comes back, and those mistakes we don't want to keep repeating. I would encourage you closely follow our roadmap, because from now on we'll really make sure the moment we start working on things, that's when they'll go on the roadmap, but we stop adding things to the roadmap before we can really confidently share a date. In the meantime, we do encourage you to work with some of our partners, such as EFICODE, who we know they are really great at building those custom integrations with some of those systems.
Thank you.
Right, do we have any more questions?
Hi there, Mike from Donos. I'm a partner, and we have customers who are using Jira software with Insight, and they are moving to the cloud. But for them to move to the cloud, it's at a big cost, because then they would need to go with Jira Service Desk in premium. And so that's a real issue for them. So I was wondering if it's possible to get Insight like another way as an app rather than bundle in the premium.
I can take that. So right now, my understanding is it's going to be JSM Premium. So they'll require JSM Premium in cloud to be able to access the Atlassian assets. That could change in the future, but right now it looks to be JSM Premium required to do that. If you have Premium, though, the Jira software projects will be able to access custom fields with asset data in there, though. So if they do go JSM Premium, both Jira software and Jira Work Manager will be able to interact with that data through a custom field, an object field.
Hi there, my name's Luke. I've just got a question regarding the agents that are available for installation on end users' machines. So there's an agent available at the moment for Jira Assets for Windows, but there isn't one for macOS and Linux. So are there any plans to introduce an agent for Linux and macOS devices, is my question.
Yeah, so right now you're correct. We're using agentless for those devices. I haven't seen on the roadmap us going that direction yet. Maybe Doro, you might have more information.
Not that I'm aware of.
Yeah, so we'll have to get back to you on that. I don't believe so, but it's something we can check into.
Yeah, I also have a question. Currently, we are using Insight fields, and when we are trying to export the data, we always get the number of the schema and the number of the object, but never the text. When is this to be fixed? Because in data center was working.
Right. I know the teams are aware of this. I would need to check when we think we can work on it and have it delivered. Leave that with me and find me after the session. I'll take your details. Because off the top of my head, I can't share a date with you.
Okay, thank you.
All right, we might do one more question before we wrap this up. Anyone? No, it's so hard to see.
Hi, my name is Brendan O'Reilly from Dacia DevOps. Could you speak a little bit more to the import strategy? I understand you're exposing APIs in Forge. What kind of vendors are you expecting to roll their own versus the ones that you're going to roll yourselves?
Yeah, so what we're basing this decision on is we're looking at customer demand. So we're looking at portals such as Jack or Jira Atlassian.com, our public Jira board where customers can upvote and add comments to some of those feature requests. We're also looking at the installation numbers that we're seeing in DC. So the top ones that we've already identified, which we think we'll definitely build, is Azure, Jamf, and SECM. Obviously, AWS is a huge one that's in really high demand, just knowing how widely adopted it is in the market. As I mentioned, we're working quite closely with them on this because they have raised some interest in potentially building one on their side. If not, it's definitely one that we would look to pick up. So I would say those are probably the top 4 we'd jump on, and then we'll evolve this over time, and we'll also continue working closer with our marketplace vendors to just see how many they would be looking to build. One more? Okay, last question.
Hi, my name is Moore. I would like to ask if Atlassian Analytics is going to be available for customers of premium and standard license, and if not, there is another solution for assets reports and dashboards?
Yeah, it's a great question, and one that has recently evolved a lot. Right now, enterprise is the main focus, and we're still working out what solutions we could offer to premium. We do actually have, I believe, a separate breakout session for analytics specifically. So I would encourage you to visit that, and the PM on that team would probably have some better answers for you as well. But right now, I can just say it's enterprise only, and we're exploring what we can do for premium too.
Yeah, there's a couple of applications in the marketplace. I think Easy BI comes to mind. I believe they might have the ability to report on assets. I've seen some customers leverage that with some success. So I would encourage you to look at that in the meantime to get that asset data out and visualize it.
Great. All right, we might wrap that up here. Thank you so much for coming, everybody.
Thanks.